The grand chamber of Celestia Prime gleamed under artificial stars. 1,000 species gathered in their designated atmospheric zones, separated by shimmering force fields that kept methane breathers from poisoning oxygen lovers, and silicon-based life forms from melting water-based ones. This was the Galactic Council, the administrative heart of civilized space, and today it buzzed with unusual tension. Director Vashkar stood at the central podium, their crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns across the chamber floor. As a luminary, Vashkar had served the council for 3 centuries, and they prided themselves on efficiency. Today's agenda item made their internal structures vibrate with frustration. "The human resource allocation is unacceptable," Vashkar announced, their voice translated simultaneously into 900 languages. "For the 3rd quarter in succession, humanity has exceeded their operational budget by 17%. In the human delegation section, Ambassador Director Sarah Chen sat perfectly still. She was a small woman by human standards, barely 5 feet tall, with gray-streaked black hair pulled into a practical bun. Around her sat 12 other human representatives, each one looking equally calm. They had learned long ago that emotional displays in council sessions were counterproductive. A holographic display materialized above the podium, showing spreadsheets and resource charts. Vashkar gestured at them with a crystalline appendage. "Observe. The humans maintain 47 communication relay stations throughout council space. Our analysis shows that 12 would be sufficient, using modern quantum entanglement networks. Yet they refuse to decommission the obsolete infrastructure." Council member Thrace of the military caste stood, his forearms crossed in a gesture of agreement. "The Thracian Empire concurs. We automated our logistics networks 2 centuries ago. Why do humans insist on staffing positions that AI can handle more efficiently?" Chen requested permission to speak. Vashkar granted it with barely concealed impatience. "Director Vashkar, honored council members," Chen began, her voice steady. "The relay stations provide redundancy. Quantum networks are efficient, but they fail catastrophically when disrupted. The analog relays ensure communication continues during emergencies." "Emergencies that have not occurred in 40 years, Vashkar countered. "This is the definition of waste. Resources spent preparing for situations that do not arise." Chen nodded slowly. "We call it insurance. You call it waste. But insurance only seems wasteful until you need it." The debate continued for 2 hours. The humans defended their staffing levels in mediation departments, their insistence on maintaining cultural databases that seemed outdated, their preference for manual oversight on systems other species had long since automated. Each time, they cited reasons: institutional knowledge, relationship maintenance, crisis preparedness. Each time, the council grew more impatient. Finally, Vashkar called for a vote. "The council will decide whether to restructure humanity's operational role. A restructuring would reduce their resource allocation by 60% and shift their status from active operational member to advisory observer. They would retain council membership, but lose direct operational authority." Chen stood again. "Director, we strongly oppose this measure. We believe the council benefits from our approach, even if it seems inefficient by your metrics." "Your opposition is noted," Vashkar replied. The vote proceeds. The chamber filled with light as council members registered their decisions. Green for approval, red for opposition. The display board lit up like a constellation. When the counting finished, the result appeared in every language simultaneously. 847 in favor, 3 opposed, 12 abstentions. The 3 opposition votes came from the Veshai, the Klent, and the Dryan, smaller species who worked closely with humans in various capacities. Their representatives looked troubled, but the decision was final. Chen rose from her seat. The chamber quieted, expecting a speech, expecting protests or passionate arguments, or perhaps even tears. Humans were known for their emotional responses. Instead, Chen simply bowed to the council. "We understand the decision. We respect the will of the council. We will begin our withdrawal procedures immediately." Voshkar's crystalline structure flickered with surprise. "You do not wish to negotiate the terms?" "No, Director. You have made your decision. We will comply." Chen's face showed no anger, no disappointment, just calm acceptance. "We request 48 hours to organize our departure and transfer our responsibilities. Will that be acceptable?" "Most acceptable," Voshkar agreed, relief evident in their tone. They had expected this to be difficult. "Then we bid the council farewell," Chen said. She and the human delegation filed out of the chamber in orderly fashion, leaving their seats empty for the first time in 200 years. In the human quarters of Celestia Prime, the word spread quickly. Sarah Chen met with the station's human administrator, Marcus Webb, a broad-shouldered man who had coordinated human operations across council space for 15 years. "How long do we actually need?" Marcus asked. 48 hours is generous," Chen replied. "Our people are professionals. They've been preparing contingency plans for years. We always knew this was possible." Marcus nodded and activated his communication device. Across Celestia Prime and throughout Council space, humans received the same message. "Protocol Exodus is active. Begin immediate withdrawal. Professional, courteous, complete." In the communication relay stations, human technicians began shutdown procedures. They left detailed documentation, neatly organized and clearly labeled. They ensured all systems were stable before they departed. In the mediation offices, human diplomats transferred their case files to Council AI systems. They included notes on cultural sensitivities, relationship histories, and ongoing negotiations. Everything properly formatted and archived. In the infrastructure maintenance divisions, human engineers checked every system one final time. They left instruction manuals, system diagrams, and emergency protocols, all written in clear, standardized galactic common language. Within 36 hours, the first transport ships departed Celestia Prime. No fanfare, no final speeches, no dramatic gestures. The humans simply packed their belongings, secured their stations, and left. Voshkar watched the departure from their office, feeling satisfied. The transition was proceeding smoothly. Other council members sent congratulatory messages, praising the efficient resolution of the human problem. Resources would be reallocated. Systems would be streamlined. The council would operate more efficiently than ever. On the final transport leaving Celestia Prime, Sarah Chen sat by a window, watching the massive station recede into the distance. Beside her, Marcus Webb looked troubled. "Do you think they'll figure it out?" he asked quietly. Chen was silent for a long moment. "Eventually. The question is, how much damage gets done before they do? Should we have warned them more explicitly?" "We tried, Marcus. For years we tried. They saw waste where we saw resilience. They saw inefficiency where we saw wisdom." Shen's expression was sad, but resigned. Some lessons can't be taught. They have to be learned. The transport ship accelerated toward the jump point that would take them out of Council space, back toward the distant star system that humans called home. Behind them, Celestia Prime gleamed in the darkness, a monument to 1,000 civilizations working in harmony. The first week after human departure passed quietly. Too quietly, though few council members noticed at first. Voskar reviewed efficiency reports with satisfaction. Resource allocation had improved by 18%. The humans' budget was being redistributed to more productive purposes. Then the incident reports began arriving. The first came from Kepler 442b, a mining colony in the outer territories. A dispute between the Zephyr miners and the indigenous Cathari had escalated beyond the usual territorial arguments. The Zephyr accused the Cathari of sabotaging equipment. The Cathari claimed the Zephyr were violating sacred sites. Within hours, the argument became a brawl. Within days, both sides had brought in armed security forces. "Send peacekeepers," Vashkar ordered. The response came back within an hour. Human Peacekeeper Division, no longer operational. Alternative forces being mobilized. Vashkar's crystalline structure flickered with annoyance. Of course, the Peacekeepers had been a human-run operation. No matter, the Luminari had their own security forces. 3 Luminari peacekeeping ships arrived at Kepler 442b within 2 days. They approached the situation with typical Luminari logic. Identify the legal violations, enforce council law, restore order. It should have been simple. Instead, the Luminari peacekeepers found themselves completely unprepared for the cultural complexities. The Zephyr operated on a honor debt system that had no direct translation to council law. The Cathari territorial claims were based on spiritual beliefs that the Luminari couldn't even comprehend. Every attempt at mediation created new misunderstandings. By the end of the week, a 2-party dispute had become a 3-way conflict, with the Luminari peacekeepers themselves under attack from both sides. Vashkar pulled up the historical records of similar disputes. Every previous incident on Kepler 442b had been resolved within 48 hours. Every single one had been handled by human peacekeepers. The pattern was consistent across dozens of colonies. How did the humans resolve these situations? Vashkar demanded. The response from the historical database was frustrating. Resolution methods not fully documented. Human peacekeepers maintained extensive cultural knowledge databases and employed case-by-case judgment protocols. These databases were left on Celestia Prime, but appear incomplete without contextual knowledge maintained by human personnel. In simpler terms, the humans had known things that they never wrote down. They had understood things that couldn't be easily explained to others. The second crisis emerged on the 4th day. The Quantum Communication Network, pride of the Council's technological advancement, experienced a cascade failure in Sector 7. 50 star systems lost instantaneous communication. Emergency repair requests went out automatically to unmanned human maintenance stations. No response. Council technicians investigated and found the problem. A solar flare had disrupted the quantum entanglement field. A rare occurrence, but not unprecedented. The repair was technically simple. Recalibrate the network from backup relay stations. Except the backup relay stations were the obsolete analog communication hubs that humans had maintained. The ones Vashkar had specifically cited as wasteful. Those stations were now shut down. Their human operators gone. Reactivate the relay stations, Vashkar ordered. They had the instruction manuals the humans had left behind. They had the system diagrams and the activation procedures. But the relays didn't respond properly. Error messages appeared in human technical shorthand that the translation systems couldn't parse accurately. Components had been maintained in ways that weren't fully documented. One technician finally identified the problem. The relay stations were semi-organic systems. They required regular manual adjustment based on local spatial conditions. The humans called it tuning the relays. There's no automated procedure, because every relay required individual attention based on experience and intuition. The quantum network remained down. Sector 7 stayed dark. By the end of the second week, Vashkar's office was receiving 50 incident reports per day. None were catastrophic individually, but together they painted a disturbing picture. Trade routes were experiencing unexplained delays. Cargo ships arrived at stations to find docking protocols malfunctioning. The problems were always small: a miscalibrated approach vector here, an incompatible cargo manifest format there, but they accumulated. Ships that once docked in 30 minutes now took 6 hours. Multiply that across thousands of daily docking procedures, and the entire council economy began to slow. The Zephyr Consortium sent an official complaint. Their trade profits had dropped by 12% in 2 weeks. If the situation didn't improve, they would consider withdrawing from council space. Administrative departments reported bizarre difficulties. The environmental control system in the council chambers began creating zones of incompatible atmospheres. Methane leaked into oxygen zones. Temperature controls fluctuated wildly. The system had always been complex, maintaining 900 different atmospheric conditions in one facility. But it had worked flawlessly for decades. Now, it was chaos. Technicians investigated and found that the system was technically functioning correctly. Every component worked within specifications, but the overall coordination was failing. Someone needed to adjust thousands of small parameters throughout the day to account for changing occupancy and activity levels. "Who handled these adjustments previously?" a technician asked. The answer came back from archived duty rosters. Human Facilities Management Team, staff of 47, reassigned following restructuring. A junior administrator made a disturbing discovery while trying to process a routine trade agreement. The document required approval from 17 different departments, each representing different member species with different legal frameworks. The administrators spent 3 days just trying to determine the correct format for submission. "How was this handled before?" they asked their supervisor. The supervisor checked the records. Human administrative clerks coordinated interdepartmental processes. They maintained informal communication networks and understood the preferences of different departments. "Can we access their procedures?" They left documentation, but it's incomplete. Much of their process involved personal relationships and institutional knowledge that isn't written down. The administrator stared at the document, then at the 17 departments, then at the impossible tangle of bureaucratic requirements. "This is going to take months. Last year it took 3 days. What changed?" The humans left. By the end of the 3rd week, Vashkar called an emergency executive session. Only the council's senior leadership attended. 12 species representing the founding members and major powers. "The transition is experiencing unexpected difficulties," Vashkar admitted, their crystalline structure dim with stress. "The human departure has created more disruption than anticipated." Thrace of the military caste gestured dismissively with 2 of his arms. "Growing pains. We simply need time to adjust our systems." "The Zephyr are threatening to withdraw," Vashkar countered. That got everyone's attention. The Zephyr Consortium controlled 30% of council trade. Their withdrawal would be catastrophic. "Why?" demanded Selesh of the Commerce Guild. "What are their specific complaints?" Vashkar displayed the reports. Docking delays, communication failures, administrative bottlenecks, dozens of small problems that accumulated into massive inefficiency. "All of these issues trace back to human-operated systems," Vashkar said quietly. "Systems we assumed were simple enough for anyone to manage. We were wrong." "Then we hire contractors to replace the human workers," Thrace suggested. "Other species can perform these functions." "We've tried." The Syndril offered their AI collective to replace human administrators. The AIs crashed within 6 hours. They found notes buried in the administrative code, warnings written by the humans. The systems were designed to require human judgment as a failsafe. The humans didn't trust pure automation. The room fell silent. Finally, Ambassador Trellin of the Veshai spoke. Her species had voted against humanity's restructuring. "I warned this would happen. The humans weren't doing simple work. They were doing essential work that everyone else considered beneath them. They were the connective tissue holding the council together." "That's absurd," Thrace said. "They were performing basic functions." "Were they?" Trellin activated her datapad. "I've been investigating. In the past 3 weeks, I've found 17 potential conflicts that didn't escalate. Want to know why? Because human diplomats had quietly resolved them before they became official incidents. I found 9 trade routes that maintained profitability despite local disruptions. Human logistics coordinators had established backup routes that aren't in any official documentation. I've found enough, Vashkar interrupted. I understand your point, but did they? Vashkar looked at the reports, the incident logs, the growing crisis. The humans had seemed so inefficient, so wasteful, so unnecessarily cautious. Now their absence was creating cascading failures throughout Council space. What had the Council done? The 4th week brought the first true catastrophe. The Kthari Industrial Combine announced immediate suspension of all Council contracts. Without the Kthari manufacturing base, 17 species faced supply shortages within a month. The Combine's statement was brief and devastating. Economic conditions no longer favorable, resuming operations under Kthari sovereign authority. Vashkar contacted Kthari leadership immediately. This violates your treaty obligations. Kthari Overseer Mandek's image appeared on the communication screen, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Article 17, Paragraph 4. Either party may suspend obligations under conditions of economic force majeure. Our contracts were profitable under previous operational conditions. Current delays and disruptions make them unsustainable. We're working to resolve the disruptions. How long? Vashkar hesitated. Unknown. Kthari Combine withdraws from Council Economic Integration. We will honor existing contracts, but accept no new obligations. The screen went dark. Within hours, panic spread through the financial networks. If the Kthari withdrew, who would replace their industrial output? The Zephyr? They were already threatening to leave. The Luminari could increase production, but not enough to fill the gap. Emergency council sessions convened. Representatives from 40 species demanded answers. The chambers descended into chaos. The translation system struggled to keep up with overlapping arguments in hundreds of languages. The environmental controls failed completely. 3 delegates collapsed from atmospheric incompatibility before the session had to be abandoned. In the aftermath, as medical teams treated the affected delegates, Vashkar retreated to their private office. Their aide, a young luminari named Kresh, brought the latest reports. Director, the situation is worse than we thought. The Drayan have been analyzing human work patterns across all council departments. They found something disturbing. Vashkar's crystalline structure pulsed with exhausted light. Show me. Kresh activated a holographic display. It showed the council's organizational structure, a complex web of departments, agencies, and working groups. Then a second layer appeared, highlighted in blue. Human personnel assignments. Observe, Kresh said. The humans appeared in official documents as holding specific positions. Communications technician, mediation specialist, facilities manager. But the Drayan analysis suggests they were doing much more. The display zoomed in on a single human, a communications technician named James Rodriguez. According to official records, Rodriguez maintained relay stations in Sector 4. Simple, well-defined work. But the Drayan had tracked Rodriguez's actual communications and movements. He had also served as an informal translator between the Zephyr and the Thracian merchants. He had maintained personal relationships with 17 different species communication officers. He had quietly rerouted communications during 3 separate diplomatic crises to ensure that inflammatory messages were delayed until cooler heads could prevail. None of this was in his official job description. None of it was documented in council procedures. Rodriguez had simply done it because it needed doing. Multiply this by every human in council service, Kresh said quietly. They weren't just performing their assigned tasks, they were filling gaps that no one else noticed existed. Vashkar stared at the display. Find me more examples. Over the following days, the full picture emerged. A human medical coordinator named Dr. Lisa Park had officially managed hospital supply chains. Unofficially, she had tracked disease patterns across council space and preemptively shipped medical resources to areas she predicted would need them. In the past 3 weeks, 2 preventable disease outbreaks had occurred because no one was watching those patterns anymore. A human administrator named Robert Chen, Sarah Chen's nephew, coincidentally, had officially processed trade documentation. Unofficially, he had maintained relationships with junior officials in 40 different species trade departments. When problems arose, he knew exactly who to contact to resolve them quietly. Without him, problems that once took hours now took weeks. A human logistics officer named Maria Santos had officially coordinated cargo transfers. Unofficially, she had noticed that certain species ships always needed the same minor repairs after long voyages. She had started pre-positioning spare parts at common destinations. Ship downtime had increased by 40% since her departure. The pattern repeated across every department, every facility, every operation where humans had worked. They had done their official jobs competently, but they had also done 1,000 unofficial things that kept the council functioning smoothly. Why? Voshkar asked. Why did they do work they weren't assigned? Kresh tilted their crystalline head. I found a quote from Ambassador Chen from a speech she gave 15 years ago. She said, "Humans learned long ago that organizations are more than their official structures. The real work happens in the spaces between the boxes on an organizational chart. We fill those spaces because we understand that societies are complex, living things. You can't reduce them to efficient processes." We thought that was inefficiency, Voshkar said softly. Yes, Director, we did. The 6th week brought the shooting war. 2 of the conflicts that had been quietly escalating, conflicts that human diplomats would have diffused, reached the breaking point. The Outer Rim territories erupted in violence. 3 species, each claiming legitimate grievances, began military operations against each other. The Council's peacekeeping forces mobilized, but they were designed to enforce peace, not create it. They could separate combatants, but couldn't address the underlying issues. The conflicts dragged on. Ambassador Trellin of the Veshai requested a private meeting with Voshkar. She arrived at the director's office, looking exhausted. Her species didn't sleep like humans did, but they required rest periods, and she clearly hadn't had one in days. Director, we need to bring the humans back, she said without preamble. I've considered it, Voshkar admitted, but the council voted. The council was wrong. I was one of 3 who voted against the restructuring. Vaklent and Drayan were the others. Do you know what we had in common? We all worked closely with humans in our respective fields. We saw what they actually did, not just what their job descriptions said. Even if I wanted to reverse the decision, it would take months to organize a vote. And we don't have months, Trellin interrupted. The Zephyr Consortium has officially announced withdrawal. They're pulling their operations out of council space over the next 60 days. When they go, the whole economic structure collapses. We have weeks at most. Voshkar's structure dimmed. What do you propose? Send an envoy. Offer the humans whatever it takes to bring them back. Full restoration of their positions. Increased authority. Financial compensation. They won't come back just for money, Voshkar said. They left without protest. They could have fought the restructuring, but they simply accepted it and left. They're not going to return for financial incentives. Then what will bring them back? Voshkar was silent for a long moment. Respect, acknowledgement, an admission that we were wrong, and probably a guarantee that it won't happen again. Can you do that? Can you admit the council made a mistake? I don't know if I have a choice, Voshkar said. Without the humans, the council is failing. We built our civilization on the principle that all species contribute according to their strengths. We told ourselves the humans were inefficient. The truth is, we didn't value their actual strengths because we didn't understand them. Trellin nodded. I'll lead the envoy if you authorize it. You're one of the few who might succeed, Voshkar agreed. But Trellin, be prepared for them to refuse. We hurt them. We dismissed their contributions. We told them they weren't good enough. They may not want to come back. But we have to try. The authorization went out the next day. A small ship, diplomatic credentials, Ambassador Traun, leading a team of representatives from the species who had voted against restructuring. Their mission: find humanity and convince them to return. As the ship prepared to depart, Voshkar watched from the observation deck. Celestia Prime looked magnificent as always, gleaming against the stars. But now Voshkar could see the cracks. The flickering lights where power systems struggled, the docking bays operating at half capacity, the sections that remained closed because environmental controls couldn't be properly maintained. The humans had been holding everything together, and the moment they let go, it all started falling apart. The question was whether they would be willing to catch it again. Ambassador Trellin's ship entered the Sol system after 9 days of travel. The journey had given her time to prepare her arguments, rehearse her appeals, and study everything available about human culture and history. None of it prepared her for what she found. The inner system was a fortress. Defensive satellites surrounded Earth and Mars in overlapping networks. Energy shields flickered in the space between planets. Automated defense platforms tracked the diplomatic ship from the moment it crossed the heliopause. "They're not taking chances," her co-pilot observed. He was Klent, a species known for their engineering expertise. These defenses weren't here 2 months ago. They built all this since leaving Council space. Trellin studied the scans. No, these defenses are old, very old. They just weren't active before. The humans had defensive capabilities the whole time they were Council members. They just never mentioned it. Why not? Because they didn't need to threaten anyone. They believed in the Council. She paused. Believed, past tense. Communication systems crackled to life. Unidentified vessel, this is Earth Defense Coordination. State your purpose. This is Ambassador Traun of the Veshai, representing the Galactic Council. We request permission to speak with human leadership regarding Council matters. A long pause. Then a different voice, older, and carrying an accent Traun couldn't place. Ambassador, this is Coordinator Michael Williams, Earth Government. We're aware of the situation in Council space. We're monitoring your communications. We know about the conflicts, the economic collapse, and the infrastructure failures. Then you understand why we've come, Traun said. The Council needs... What the Council needs, Williams interrupted gently but firmly, is not our immediate concern. However, we're willing to talk, transmitting coordinates for a meeting location. Come alone, Ambassador. Your ship and crew will be safely accommodated, but this conversation should be private. The coordinates appear on her display. A space station in orbit around Mars. Trellin agreed and transferred to a shuttle. The station was small by Council standards, but efficiently designed. Very human, no wasted space, but not cramped either. Every surface served multiple purposes. The walls displayed what appeared to be gardens and natural landscapes, creating an illusion of openness. Coordinator Williams met her in a simple conference room. He was tall for a human, with dark skin and gray hair, probably in his 7th or 8th decade. He wore plain clothes, no ceremonial robes or symbols of authority. Just practical clothing, suitable for a space station environment. Ambassador Traun, he greeted her warmly. Thank you for making the journey. Can I offer you refreshment? She settled into a chair, designed for her species' physiology. Someone had prepared for her arrival. Water would be appreciated. Williams provided it personally, then sat across from her. I understand you were one of 3 who voted against our restructuring. Yes, my species has worked closely with humans for decades. We valued your contributions. But not enough to convince the others. Trellin met his eyes. No, not enough. I'm sorry for that. Williams nodded. I appreciate the honesty. Now, what does the council want? They want you back. Full restoration of your previous positions, increased resource allocation, formal apologies. No. The blunt refusal stopped her mid-sentence. Coordinator Williams. Ambassador, let me be clear. We're not interested in returning to our previous positions. We're not interested in being the council's maintenance workers and diplomats and problem solvers, while being treated as inefficient and wasteful. His voice remained calm, but Trellin heard steel beneath it. The council recognizes that mistakes were made. Do they, or do they just recognize that they need us? Williams leaned forward. Tell me, Ambassador, why did the council think we were inefficient? The official reasoning was that you maintained redundant systems, employed manual processes that could be automated, and spent resources on preventive measures for unlikely scenarios. In other words, we prepared for disasters, maintained backup systems, and valued human judgment over pure automation. Yes. And now that you're experiencing disasters, finding that automated systems fail, and discovering that human judgment was preventing problems no one else noticed, now you want us back. Yes, Trellin said quietly. Williams stood and walked to the window overlooking Mars. The red planet filled half the view. Terraforming equipment visible as bright points on the surface. Do you know why we maintained those redundant communication relays? You said for emergencies. Specifically, we maintained them because we studied galactic history. Over the past 10,000 years, there have been 47 civilization-ending catastrophes in this region of space. Solar flares, electromagnetic pulses, quantum field collapses, events that destroyed advanced communication systems instantly. Only civilizations with backup analog systems survived long enough to rebuild. He turned back to face her. We maintain those relays because we know that complex systems fail. Not might fail, will fail. It's not a question of if, but when. We learned this lesson on Earth through ice ages, asteroid impacts, and nearly destroying ourselves multiple times. We built our entire approach around resilience, not efficiency. The Council didn't understand. The Council didn't want to understand. They saw only the surface, humans doing unglamorous work, maintaining old systems, insisting on manual processes. They never asked why. They just assumed we were primitive or inefficient. But here's what really bothers me, Ambassador. We told them. We explained our reasoning in countless reports and presentations. We showed them the historical data. We warned them what would happen if these systems failed. And they ignored us because it didn't fit their model of how things should work. Trellin felt a sinking sensation in her primary stomach. You're not coming back. Not on the Council's terms, no. Williams paused. But I'm not entirely closed to discussion. The humans who served in Council space believed in the mission. We believe that different species working together can achieve more than any species alone. We believed in the Galactic Council. Many still do. Then what would it take? Williams was quiet for a long moment. Real change, not just restoring our positions, but changing how the Council operates. Acknowledge that efficiency isn't the highest value. That resilience matters. That the unglamorous work is often the most important work. That different species have different wisdom to contribute. He pulled up a holographic display showing a document. This is our proposal. It's non-negotiable, but it's also not unreasonable. Read it. Take it back to the Council. If they can accept it, we'll talk about re-engagement. Trellin read through the document. It was extensive, but the core demands were clear. Humans would return to operational roles with enhanced authority over infrastructure and crisis management. They would have seats on the Executive Council, not just membership in the General Assembly. They would establish a new council office dedicated to identifying and supporting species who performed essential but undervalued work. And they required a formal acknowledgement from the Council that their previous dismissal was an error in judgment. "This is asking for significant power," Trell noted. "We're asking for authority proportional to responsibility," Williams corrected. "For 200 years, we held critical systems together. We prevented wars, maintained infrastructure, and solved problems that no one else noticed. We did this without recognition or appropriate authority. That's not sustainable. Some council members will resist. I know. That's why I said it's non-negotiable. If the council wants humanity's participation, this is the price. Not because we're trying to dominate, but because we won't return to being invisible workers who get blamed when things go wrong." Trell folded the document into her data storage device. "I'll bring this to Voshkar and the Executive Council. But Coordinator Williams, how much time does the Council have? How long before the collapse becomes irreversible?" Williams looked sad. "You probably have a few months before complete economic collapse. But the real damage? That's already done. The Council proved that it doesn't value the work that keeps it functioning. Even if they accept our terms, it will take years to rebuild trust. And some of the humans who served won't come back at all. They're tired of being unappreciated." "I understand," Trell said. "For what it's worth, some of us always appreciated your service." "I know, Ambassador. That's why I'm talking to you instead of simply refusing contact." Williams stood, offering his hand in the human gesture of farewell. "Safe travels. I hope the Council chooses wisdom over pride." Trellin accepted the handshake, then returned to her ship. As they left the Sol system, she looked back at Earth, a small blue marble surrounded by defensive satellites, and the evidence of a species that had survived countless catastrophes by learning to prepare for the worst. The question was whether the Galactic Council could learn the same lesson before it was too late. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in 40 years. Every member species sent representatives. The chamber was packed beyond capacity, with delegates filling observation galleries and watching via holographic link from overflow rooms. Voshkar stood at the central podium, their crystalline structure dim with exhaustion. 2 months had passed since humanity's departure. 2 months of cascading failures, economic collapse, and growing chaos. The Zephyr Consortium had withdrawn completely. 4 border conflicts had escalated into shooting wars. 17 species had formally suspended their council obligations. "The Executive Council has reviewed the human proposal," Voshkar announced. "Before we vote, Ambassador Trellin will brief the full council on her findings." Trellin took the podium. She had prepared this presentation carefully, knowing that the council's future depended on it. "I traveled to Earth and met with Coordinator Williams of the Human Government. He was direct about humanity's position. They will not return as subordinate workers. They require equal partnership and formal recognition of their contributions." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Thrace of the military caste stood. "This is extortion. They abandoned the council in its time of need, and now they demand rewards for returning?" "They didn't abandon the council," Trellin countered. "The council dismissed them. We voted to restructure their role because we considered them inefficient. We were wrong." "Wrong?" Thrace's forearms gestured emphatically. "They wasted resources on unnecessary redundancy." "That redundancy is the only thing keeping half our systems operational," Trellin interrupted. "The quantum communication network failed in 4 sectors. Do you know what provided backup communications? The obsolete analog relays the humans maintained. We're using them right now to coordinate this session." She activated a display showing the council's infrastructure status. Red indicators outnumbered green by a vast margin. "This is our reality. Power systems failing, communication networks unstable, trade routes disrupted, Administrative functions paralyzed. Every red indicator represents something the humans were maintaining that we didn't understand or appreciate. Selish of the Commerce Guild spoke up. But surely we can hire other species to perform these functions. We don't need humans specifically. We tried, Voshkar interjected. The Sindril offered their AI collective. It crashed. The Korthons sent engineering teams. They couldn't interpret the human-designed systems. The Valasian Administrative Corps attempted to process trade documentation. They've completed in 2 months what the humans would have finished in 2 weeks. Voshkar's structure pulsed with frustrated light. The problem isn't that humans are the only ones capable of this work. The problem is that humans designed these systems with their particular approach. Resilience over efficiency, redundancy over streamlining, judgment over automation. To operate these systems, you need to think like humans think. And we can't simply hire that capability. We need the humans themselves, along with their institutional knowledge and operational philosophy. A junior delegate from a smaller species stood. What exactly are the humans demanding? Trellin pulled up the formal proposal. First, restoration of all operational roles with enhanced authority over infrastructure and crisis management. Second, 2 seats on the Executive Council with full voting rights. Third, establishment of a new council office called Advocates for the Overlooked, dedicated to identifying and supporting essential but undervalued work. Fourth, and perhaps most difficult, a formal council acknowledgement that their dismissal was an error in judgment. The chamber erupted in debate. Voices overlapped in hundreds of languages. The translation system struggled to keep pace. Finally, Voshkar called for order. The Executive Council has already voted on this proposal, Voshkar announced. 7 in favor, 3 opposed, 2 abstentions. We recommend the full council accept these terms. You're rewarding them for leaving, Thrace protested. No, said a new voice. Ambassador Chen had entered the chamber quietly, unannounced. She walked to the speaker's platform with the same calm dignity she had shown 2 months earlier. You're correcting a mistake before it destroys what you've built. The chamber fell silent. Chen continued, The human government didn't send me. I came on my own initiative because I still believe in the Council's mission. But I need to explain something that I don't think you understand. When you dismissed us, you didn't just remove workers. You removed a buffer against catastrophe. She activated her own display, showing historical data. In the 200 years humans served on this council, do you know how many civilization-threatening crises occurred in council space? None. 0. Do you know how many occurred in the 200 years before humans joined? 17. The numbers hung in the air, undeniable. We didn't prevent those crises through dramatic interventions, Chen explained. We prevented them by noticing small problems before they became big ones, by maintaining relationships that defused tensions, by building redundancy that prevented single points of failure, by remembering that complex systems always fail in unexpected ways. She looked around the chamber. You called this inefficiency. We call it wisdom. Wisdom earned through surviving countless disasters on our home planet. We almost destroyed ourselves a dozen times before we learned these lessons. Chen paused. The proposal you're considering isn't about rewarding humans. It's about acknowledging that different species bring different strengths. You excel at efficiency, logical analysis, technological advancement. We excel at resilience, adaptability, and preparing for worst-case scenarios. Both are valuable. Both are necessary. Thrace stood again, but this time his tone was different. Ambassador Chen, I voted for your restructuring. I believed humans were holding the council back. I was wrong. On behalf of the Thracian Empire, I apologize. Similar voices rose throughout the chamber. Not everyone, some delegates remained hostile or skeptical. But enough. Enough to matter. The Council will decide whether to accept the human proposal and formally acknowledge the error in their dismissal. Green for acceptance, red for rejection. The chamber filled with light. This time, Trellin watched the display with hope rather than dread. The votes registered. When the count finished, the result appeared. 741 in favor, 93 opposed, 28 abstentions. Chen bowed to the council. Thank you. I'll convey this to Coordinator Williams. Over the following months, the reintegration began. It wasn't smooth. Many humans who had left didn't want to return. Some had found the dismissal too hurtful, the lesson too bitter. But enough came back to begin stabilizing the critical systems. More importantly, things changed. The humans didn't just resume their old roles. They brought other species into their work, teaching them the principles of resilience and redundancy. The Vashai archivists learned to work alongside human information specialists. The Ka-Lent engineers collaborated with human maintenance teams. The Drayon logisticians integrated human planning methodologies into their operations. The new advocates for the overlooked office began identifying critical but invisible work throughout council space. They found janitorial staff who prevented disease outbreaks through vigilant cleaning. They found junior administrators who kept information flowing through informal networks. They found cultural liaisons who prevented misunderstandings from becoming conflicts. Each time, they asked the same question. What essential work is being done that no one notices? And each time, they found answers that surprised the council leadership. 5 years after humanity's return, Vashkar and Sarah Chen stood together on an observation deck of Celestia Prime, watching ships come and go from the docking bays. The station gleamed as brightly as ever, but now Vashkar could see the layers of complexity beneath the surface. The redundant systems, the manual oversight, the relationships and informal networks that made it all function. I still believe in efficiency, Vashkar said quietly. My species is built around logical optimization. Efficiency is valuable, Chen agreed. But it's not the only value. Sometimes the most efficient path leads to a cliff. Redundancy and resilience might seem wasteful when everything is going well, but they're what keep you alive when things go wrong. We treated you as inferior because you weren't efficient, and we almost let your civilization collapse because of it. Chen smiled slightly. Neither of us was completely right. The best solutions usually combine different perspectives. Vashkar's crystalline structure pulsed thoughtfully. The humans have a saying, don't they? Something about not knowing what you have until it's gone? You don't know what you've got till it's gone, Chen quoted. It's from an old song. Very old. How did humans learn this wisdom? Chen looked out at the stars. The hard way. Through disasters and near extinctions, and countless mistakes, we learned that the universe is more complex than any model can capture. That systems fail in unexpected ways. That relationships matter more than efficiency. That the work nobody notices is often the work that keeps everything functioning. She turned to face Vashkar directly. And we learned that we can't do it alone. No species can. That's why the Council matters. Not because it's efficient, but because it brings together different kinds of wisdom. Your logical analysis, our resilience planning, the Veshai's historical perspective, the Klent's engineering excellence. All of it matters. I understand now, Vashkar said. When we dismissed you, we weren't just losing workers. We were losing a perspective we desperately needed. And when we left, without fighting to stay, we almost let pride override our commitment to the mission. Chen extended her hand. We both made mistakes. The question is whether we learned from them. Vashkar reached out with a crystalline appendage, carefully grasping Chen's hand in the human gesture of partnership and agreement. I believe we have, and I believe the Council is stronger for it. Below them, in the docking bays, a mixed crew of humans and Luminari worked together to repair an environmental control system. Nearby, a Veshai archivist consulted with a human information specialist about historical precedents for a current diplomatic crisis. In the administrative offices, humans and 17 other species collaborated on streamlining processes while maintaining appropriate redundancy. The council had learned its lesson. Efficiency mattered, but so did resilience. Innovation mattered, but so did preparation. Progress mattered, but so did learning from the past. And perhaps most importantly, every contribution mattered, even the ones that happened quietly, in the background, performed by people no one noticed until they were gone. The humans had departed quietly. The council had learned loudly. And in the aftermath, something stronger had emerged. A true partnership built on mutual respect rather than assumptions about whose work mattered and whose didn't. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was better. And in the complex, chaotic universe they all inhabited, better was often the best anyone could hope for.